This is Bob Rourke with Business Leaders Podcast, and today our guest is Jason Thomas. Jason is the Vice President of Brokerage and co-owner of Raincatcher, a business brokerage and M&A firm who partners with entrepreneurs and business owners to help source the best win-win deal for all parties. After spending nearly a decade in the real estate sales and development industry, Jason knows what it truly takes to get a large transaction through to the finish line. Hard work, communication, and the ability to connect with your clients. Jason is a licensed business intermediary and real estate broker. As an owner in multiple businesses, Jason knows the challenges that small business owners face on the day-to-day and cherishes the ability to help them reap the benefits of all their hard work through the sale of their company. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, give us a little background or a snapshot of how you got here.
Well, it's a long journey, but I started my career in real estate, as you had mentioned. But I think more importantly, I come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad was a small business owner. My mom was a small business owner, and I think that's ingrained in my roots. I remember the first experience I had in owning a business was in Hilton Head, South Carolina. As a young child, I actually sold golf balls back to golfers. I would go in the ponds and fish them out and set up a little table on the side of the golf course and sell these golf balls back to these guys for 50 cents a piece or $1 a piece. I remember that so clearly, and that's kind of fast forward through my life to where I am now. I thought my career was going to be in real estate for a long time until I went back to get my master's degree in business administration. And during that process, I really started to think about the opportunities that were out there for me and my experience in sales and real estate and how I can help small business owners. Right during that same time, my dad was in the process of selling his insurance company, and he had sold his insurance company to this investment bank. And in that process, just realized that it wasn't the right fit, and it ended up buying his business back from the bank a couple years later. So that was the world kind of aligned at that point, and that was right around the time that I met Raincatcher and was introduced to Raincatcher and decided that this was the career and the path that I really wanted to go down.
I think about we're kind of the fabric of our past and what we bring to the table. My first question is getting golf balls. There weren't gators in South Carolina at that time, were there?
There were gators. That was that was the scary part of it. We would wade and dive into these ponds, and we definitely had some encounters with some alligators. Not too big ones, but they were there for sure.
Well, that puts a risk premium on the golf ball price, I'm thinking.
That's why it was one for $1 or 3 for $5.
I think about that, and I think there's a whole industry around that now. Getting the golf balls out. And when you watched your dad and talked to your dad post sale, and he left that business and then he went on to whatever was next. What did you remember or note after that departure?
He tells me a story about he started the business 30 years ago. It was an insurance business in South Carolina. And he was the CEO and president and the founder of the company, and he sold to this bank. And part of the requirement of the sale was for him to stay on post closing, which is very similar to a lot of our business owners. And he said that it was the day that he needed staples, and he asked. Typically, he'd say, "I need staples." Hey, ask the secretary, give me some. I need some more staples. Go, can we order some more? And he had to fill out, she's like, "Oh, I can't order staples. You have to fill out an expense report." And, this is a guy that's been running this business for 30 years. And now he's having to, this is just one small example. Now he has to actually fill out expense reports, justify why he needs to have staples. And it's a need that, obviously a small business has. And this was a very successful insurance company. And that was just one example of the waterfall of kind of expectations that he had that just didn't come to fruition like he wanted, and how they were driving the future of the business. Just for him, he wanted his company to go in a different direction, and he lost that control once he sold, and that was ultimately what drove him to buying it back.
I think about that, and you've got this tapestry of experience and the entrepreneurial gene, for lack of a better term. So for you, when you were looking at it, how did you find Raincatcher, and what was it in the Raincatcher culture that drew you in?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's interesting how fate kind of aligns sometimes. And like I had mentioned before, I was really kind of thinking that real estate development was my career path. And I was introduced. This was shortly after I finished up my MBA, and I was introduced to the original founder of Raincatcher, and now my partner Marla DiCarlo, through actually a fly fishing expo. I'm an avid fly fisherman. One of my early 20s, I used to be a fly fishing guide, and Marla and the original founder of Raincatcher actually owned another business called Boulder Boat Works, which is a drift boat manufacturing company here in Colorado. And I had been introduced to them through an associate, through a friend, and he said, "Hey, you should go talk to these guys. They've got a great fishing company. You'd really learn. It'd be great for you to learn more about it." And so I went to this expo to really talk about fishing, which I can easily do, and started talking to them. And the conversation quickly shifted to their other business, which was they were just launching, which was a business brokerage company. And after hearing, not that they just wanted to sell businesses, it was really around the fabric of why they had chosen to be in the business brokerage space, and why they were trying to be there, that I really started to fall in love with the concept. And what that was to them was that they truly, at the heart of the culture of the business, they want to help small business owners. They believe that small business owners deserve better representation, that the industry as a whole lacks professionalism. And then there's a really good opportunity to bring really nice processes and best practices to this market, and you kind of leverage that through digital technology. And I heard this, and it's like this light went off in my head, and literally within 30 days I had quit my current job. I was doing real estate in Denver, and joined Raincatcher. And from there, it's history. It's been a great ride so far.
We've talked some, and I do have a really interesting question. You're from South Carolina. How is it that you're not a bass fisherman, and how did you get wrapped around fly fishing as opposed to bass fishing?
I am a bass fisherman. I actually
Oh,
do a lot of
so
bass fishing. I actually learned how to fly fish for bass in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and from
ah,
there it's grown to trout and to permit and tarpon and
hmm
saltwater species as well. So if it swims, I'll fish for it. I'm not a purist, Bob. I will use a regular rod, regular tackle. I'm not a purist, but I do love fly fishing.
it's yeah. I grew up in the deep South bass fishing. In fact, I just got off the Rodman impoundment down in Florida not that long ago, and and then I fly fish down in south of Cancun as well. I'm much more dangerous, or as the guy says, you're a good monkey hunter. So fly fishing is not something I think I can make a living doing. But as you look at rain catcher in the culture, so you had the original nucleus of you and Marla,
Mhm.
and then the business starts to grow. And you guys have, I think, what, 6 brokers and associate brokers, or did it just grow to 8?
Yeah, so we're just at 8 brokers now, including myself.
I think about the culture of a smaller firm,
Mhm.
and then as you start to expand the firm, how do you guys take and teach and or transfer the culture that you guys envision to the folks, say, because you have a distributed group of folks? How do you transmit that culture?
One of the first things we ask the people that we're bringing under our team is, why do you want to join Raincatcher? Why do you want to be a business broker? Why do you want to be in this industry? And there's all sorts of answers. I want to make money. I want to have flexibility. But at the core, what we're looking for is for someone to say, I want to help small business owners. And that is fundamentally what we do. And everything else falls into place. Obviously, there's a lot of hard work and process and stuff that's put behind it. But if you have that core mission that you want to help a small business owner, and it's not just about the transaction, that's why we bring people into our team. And that's what Marla and I stress over and over and over again. And I think it shows with our messaging. I think it shows with the way that we interact with clients. And you can see it as the business grows, that people are receptive to that message.
I think out in the space of the small business owner, and for me, I got I serve a lot of business owners in the business I have, and I'm also a small business owner outside of this current business. And the lack of, I mean, I think a lot of small business owners don't know what they don't know when it comes to selling their business. And when you think about your past experience with your dad not only selling his company but going in and buying it back and then being in the commercial real estate, do you think that gives you a particular insight that you bring forward when you're working with other business owners?
It does. I think that not only my past experience, but my current experience as an owner of Raincatcher and the previous businesses that I've owned, I understand what it means to, try to figure out how to pay payroll. The stress that, the actual people that you're paying payroll to don't really understand, where's that next check going to come from? Those are real challenges that unless you're in the trenches as a business owner, you just don't quite understand. And so I think I can relate in that way. I've been through really what it means to try and build and grow a business. And I've made a lot of sacrifices, and I've seen a lot of sacrifices from my parents as they've grown their businesses. And those are really challenging decisions that you have to make. And, I think I can relate to a lot of business owners because of that.
Well, I think about empathy and the emotional response, in talking to a business owner that's getting ready, like your father, he probably spent more time with his business than he did with his family.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's definitely the case.
And so you're selling one of your children effectively.
And maybe he'd want to do that at one time or another with me. Um, it's true. This is I think important to note for us in Raincatcher. 95% of the business that we work with are original owners, original founders, first-time business sellers, and this is a lifetime event. I mean, it's not just a business transaction, not just like you're going out and selling a house. This is people's identity in a lot of regards. This is their life, and so respecting that, being empathetic to that, and understanding what they're going through is one of our largest responsibilities as a broker. And for us, it's not just about getting the deal done. It's figuring out, is now the right time to sell? Realistically, I know you want to sell and I know you want to exit, but is that the right time? Or what are your goals afterwards? What are you going to do once you do get that check? And once you are out of the business, are you ready for that? You can only play so much golf. Now, people say that, but I could probably fish for the rest of my life. So, but I hear for a lot of people that, post sale, you can only do so many hobbies and you need something to be involved in. And I think that's genuine. I think people, especially successful entrepreneurs, need that, that next thing or need to be involved in something. So there's also an emotional side post sale that people struggle with. So for us, that's kind of navigating those waters and trying to provide guidance and just, putting the right team together to help them be successful prior to sale and also post sale.
When you're working with a business owner, what do you think is the most important thing that you do and that helps that business owner looking to sell?
I think that, our role is to help them be kind of level-headed.
Hmm.
Um, it's to be, one, to help them prepare, two, just to be level-headed about the transaction and help them understand what to expect and understand what their expectations are. There's a lot of, I think, misinformation out there, and sometimes expectations are set that may not be realistic. So we really have to work hard with the sellers to give them a clear roadmap of what this process looks like from A to Z and guide them along the way and kind of ground them in that process so that they don't get distracted and or disappointed when they have an expectation that may not be delivered in the process.
I think about that entire sales process and pre-framing the challenges. You can say, the buyer's going to either, one type or another buyer, and the buyer could be coming in and going like, well, your kid is not nearly as attractive as you think your kid is, and the business owner in many cases, I think, would be highly offended if you call their business in the slightest bit ugly.
Yeah. Everyone's baby is the prettiest for sure.
having seen some, you know, you kind of go, well, they'll grow into it, you know. But, you know, I think about, you know, as you drill down and look at the challenges, and then, you know, you have a number of sellers out there that have talked about the process and they go, it was less than fun, you know, and some of the advisors and brokers were not exactly helpful. Um, you know, what are some of the things that affect, you know, the track record of selling or your reputation as a business broker and a business owner?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that a business owner can do is prepare. Um, Business owners spend so much time building their business, and
Hmm.
they don't spend a lot of time preparing to exit their business. And so oftentimes we'll get a seller that'll come to us and say, "I'm ready to sell." And we look at the business and
They
we're like,
look at their watch. Yeah, it's
"Yeah,
time.
they're like, "Well, I want to sell now." And we're like, "Well, okay." And they have certain expectations, and it's not always the best time right now to sell. So there's a lot of things that business owners can do to prepare their company for sale. And so I think that's one of the biggest both risks to go rushing the process, and also one of the things that a lot of sellers don't think about and don't do. They just think that they're ready, and so now's the time. Where I think a business owner can really, you know, prepare their business or make their business more presentable is doing some work ahead of time, and that can be all sorts of things. And that's one of the things that we do as a company is we kind of analyze a company when they come in to us, and we start having those initial conversations. You know, fundamentally, is now the best time, or are there items that we can work on to help improve the likelihood of your business selling, or the likelihood of a buyer saying, well, this is a great business, instead of trying to beat it up or telling you that it's not pretty. Um, when you rush the process, sometimes those red flags become a little bit more prevalent because you didn't kind of think through it and prepare and get it ready. It's like staging a home before you go to the market. You know,
Hmm.
putting a fresh coat of paint on the walls goes a long way.
You know, I think about, you know, one of the questions I always think is, man, if I could have talked to you 5 years ago, before you got to here today, where you're ready to sell the company, if you had the opportunity to offer advice to the business owner 5 years before they arrive at your door, what are the top one or two things you would suggest to them that they might do to improve the value?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that a small business owner can do is to separate themselves from the business. I think the natural inclination for small business owners is they need to have their hands in everything, and that they're that important to the vitality of the business, and that without them it would fail. Well, that's the truth. If you're that entrenched in the business, it's very difficult to pass that on to a buyer. So really working hard to um, you know, separate yourself, put key management and key processes in place to where you're not important. And that's really hard
Mhm.
for a business owner to accept. They're not in control anymore. Obviously, strategically, you can be in control and you can guide the direction of the business, but you don't need to be in the trenches, and you don't need to be on the day to day involved in the decision making of a company. And that's one of the biggest things that I could recommend. I think secondly is your financials have to be clean, and you really need to spend the time and have the clean and really reconciled financials. So we have a saying, it's like, the way that you put financials in the system or input data, garbage in, garbage out.
Mhm.
You really want to make sure that the financials are clean, and the numbers that you're representing in your sale of your business um, are true and verifiable. I think sometimes small business owners get a little sloppy on how books are done, and that's something that can be detrimental in the sale process.
You know, I think about, so I'm the business owner sitting out there and going like, what do you mean not clean financials? What are some of the more egregious things that you see in financials that would raise a flag for a buyer?
So part of what we do on business transactions is we look at what we call seller's discretionary income.
Mhm.
What is the true income of the business when you look at ad backs? And ad backs are typically, personal or discretionary expenses that are run through the company. I mean, we understand that small business owners run a lot of discretionary expenses through their business, but that would be one area where a business owner could clean that up.
Mhm.
Stop running your personal expenses through your company. most people do it to shelter, tax obligations, but to make your business more sellable, that's something that you probably want to limit. Another area where we see that there's a challenge is both on reconciliations, not reconciling your books every month. Maybe they do it once a year, maybe they don't do it at all. And that can really be hard to sell a company that doesn't have reconciled financials. And then sometimes you get a very mass discrepancy between, say, your QuickBooks accounts and your tax returns. People always say, well, oh yeah, well, I beat up my tax returns so I don't have to pay money to Uncle Sam. Well, that's great, but also it really limits their ability for the buyer to get financing. It limits really what are the true financials for the business. So that would be another area that I would just add caution, or just run it as clean as possible.
As you guys have dealt with in Raincatcher's history, God knows how many companies that you guys have talked with or sold. And if you looked across that inventory, and there's some where the sale failed for one reason or another, what would you say outside of Raincatcher the failure rate on sales might be out there when a business owner is thinking about selling?
Yeah, so it's somewhere around a quarter to a third of the businesses that go onto the market actually sell. So we're talking 25 to 33% of businesses that actually go out to market are actually going to close. So it's a high failure rate.
And it's, for me, that's just a stunning number. There was a statistic I saw that said 2/3 of all jobs created in the United States after the crash of '08 were by small business owners.
Mhm.
And so you think about, well, if the small business owner goes to sell the company and 3 out of 4 don't sell, what happens to the families and employees that depend on
Yes.
that business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so either the business doesn't sell and they have to close the doors, which is the worst thing ever. I mean, it absolutely gives me heartburn when I drive through areas and I see, going out of business
Mm-hmm.
signs on storefronts. I mean, retail is hard enough, but then you see, storefronts that are closing. And I think about it and I was like, well, did they have the opportunity to sell that business? Did they have the right representation? Did they even know how to sell a business? And were there any resources available to that, that business owner? And that hurts. I mean, to see that someone has to just sell their inventory and close the doors.
I think about all the years, right? And the struggle and all this triumphs and challenges of a business owner. And then you come to the tail end where it's 80% of your net worth and it doesn't transact. And I think that's the statistic. Small business owners, about 80% of their net worth is in their business. And I think, there's the viewpoint, you got the seller's viewpoint of his business, and then you got the buyer's viewpoint. What are the types of buyers out there, and what types of things do you find that sellers don't really recognize from a buyer's perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to answer your question about buyers, so there are all sorts of buyers out there. I think that you can kind of break them down in a few categories. You have your financial buyers, so people that just look on straight cash flow, that want to buy a good business. They don't really care too much about industry, but they want steady cash flow and maybe a good management team, and they'll buy it more as an investment.
Mhm.
And you're going to look at institutional buyers. Look at private equity or banks or more structured firms that buy businesses for their investors. And then you have strategic buyers that are in the same industry that buy a good business as an add-on to their existing business line. I think sometimes sellers don't really acknowledge the risk that buyers are taking by buying their business. It's not, a business is a living, breathing organism. It's not just a house, right? There's so many different moving parts. There's so many different things that can go wrong. A key employee leaves. There's a rise in the cost of goods. I mean, there's the relationships that the owner had don't transfer over to the buyer.
There's a tariff that's instituted.
There's a tariff that is instituted.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I mean, you look at manufacturing. The beginning of this year was one of the hottest industries, And within a quick period of time, manufacturing has slowed down in this country, and there's a lot of headwinds facing that industry. So deals that may have been worth 30 million in or 3 million, whatever the number is, in the beginning of 19, now are having a hard time selling at that same multiple. So things can change quickly. And I think sometimes sellers don't acknowledge that there are those risks out there. And the buyer is taking the full brunt of those risks.
In your experience in working with sellers, many of the sellers, they arrive with a thought process of, I think my business is worth X. All right. And in your experience, where do you think those buyers get that valuation judgment from? And where do you guys get your valuation estimates from?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I hope that we're pulling some of the same resources, and I think that's one thing that I think we do well as a company. We really look at a multiple of different resources to try and understand what the true value of a company is. So from our standpoint, we typically will look at the earnings of a company, and then we'll try and benchmark the business against other businesses within that industry. And we look at very similar to you look at comparable market sales for real estate. You do the same thing for businesses. You'll look at, all right, what have businesses in this size range in this industry sold for historically? And we use comp sources, much like you would see in real estate. And then we apply a multiple to the earnings. And that kind of gives you a valuation, really a valuation range, because there's always a high and a low multiple. And where you fall in that multiple range really depends on the nuances of your business. How much customer concentration is there? How much owner dependence is there? So there's different levers that you look at to determine where that multiple actually falls.
My sense of in talking to a number of business owners, I'll say, so what are you going to do next after this?
Yep.
You go, I'm really not sure. And I says, well, what's your business worth? They go, well, I don't really know. And I said, have you looked at any trade journals? Have you gathered any information of any kind to really try and says, well, I think it's worth X. And you go, well, how did you arrive at that number? And, for me, I have a real challenge when I talk to the business owner to try to figure out what frame of reference they're using. And for you guys, when you have the resources, you have the experience, and one of the things we haven't talked about that Raincatcher has is they have a really good inventory of buyers.
We do. We've worked really hard. We work on the sell side, so we represent sellers, and that's our core business. But I think one of the values that we bring is our buyer database. So we are representing sellers, but we're also out there nurturing buyers. And what I mean by that is that we set up buyer calls, we vet buyers, we add them to our database, we have conversations and trying to understand what they're looking for, what industries are attractive to buyers at this time. And we segment out our database that way. So we know when we take a deal to the market, we have 500 buyers looking for a manufacturing company between $500 and $1 million. And that's really important because those buyers have committed capital. They're ready to move. And if you have a good group of buyers ready and willing, you can often get multiple offers for a deal at one time.
Well, you guys have been recognized too nationally for the skill set that you guys bring to the table.
We have. It's, I'm just so thrilled with the success we've had so far and where we're going. But we got recognized by Inc. magazine as the best business broker in the U.S. We just got recognized in Denver as the best business broker of 2019. So we're, our core goal is to disrupt the business brokerage space. We want to redefine what it means to be a business broker. We really want to bring kind of the best practices that you see that these Fortune 500 companies get with representation. We want to bring those best practices down to the small business market. There's no reason that a business selling for 3 million shouldn't get the same representation as a business selling for 100 million. And that's our true goal, is to try and bring that down to the space.
I think about that effort and, the transmission of culture recognition that you guys have. And when you talk to a new business owner, uh, there's some level of pushback that you get on either the fees or their perception of the value that the fees represent.
Yeah, no, it's a it's a challenging process, and I think part of it is educating the business owner of everything that we do, um, and all the value that we add. And what I try and tell people is that, look, the fees. Let me back up. Our fees are success based, so we make our money when the business owner makes their money, and so we align our objectives completely with the business owner. And I look at it as a partnership. You know, we're going side by side. We're on the same side of the table, and we're driving to the same goal. And that's to sell your business for the most amount of money possible in the quickest amount of time. That's not easy, though. I mean, that's easy.
Easy to say,
Yeah,
yeah.
easy to say, but there's all sorts of challenges along the way. And the reason why our fees are what they are is because we take the risk with the business owner, and we think that their reward should be commensurate with the risk that we take. We front load costs. We spend hours and upon months of time on the deal only to get paid when they get paid.
I think about in a number of discussions, and if you're looking at a particular business and they say we're looking for this sale price, and you go, we don't think you're there,
Yeah.
after you go through the due diligence process. But I think you guys are also in the world of making recommendations to the business owners. Says, but if you do A, B, C, and D, or this recommended group, says, and postpone, that the business may get closer to the target you're looking for. So you do that as well.
We do. I think what differentiates us, and I think whether a business owner is talking to me or Raincatcher or anyone else, you really need to figure out, and I mentioned this earlier, is now the right time to sell? So when we start talking to business owners, we take a very holistic view. We're not a volume brokerage. We're not trying to just list a company. We truly believe in what's best for the business owner. So we'll talk to someone, and we typically have them take an assessment. The assessment is value. It gives you 8 key drivers to being able to sell your company, and it gives us a score. So it's a rating system, and based on where that score falls, it gives us a good idea: is now the right time to sell your company? And if it's not, we have that discussion with them. And if there's things that we identify that they can do to improve the value of their company, we have a great affiliate program, and we'll recommend that they work with one of our advisors to work on those issues. And again, I mentioned a couple of these. That could be over dependence on the owner. How do you separate yourself from the daily grind of the business? And there's ways to do that. We work with a great group that works on a system called EOS. Maybe it's just your financials need to be cleaned up, and you need a part-time CFO. So we work with business owners to do that too. And the way that we look at it, it may take longer to get them on the market, but it's going to be a much better business, and our success rate is going to be much higher.
I think about, you were talking previously, there could be one industry, a business for sale in an industry, and it could sell from one end of the multiple range to the other. And my assumption in the assessment tool is that you have a lower number and a higher number, and the higher the number, the more likely that your multiple expansion will occur.
Correct. Yeah. The closer you are to 100, the more likely you're going to get a higher multiple for the business.
And I think about the perception of the potential buyer. I don't have to fix this. I don't have to fix that, and there's no surprises in the process.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. I think there's a lot of information out there that, all right, businesses trade for 3 times earnings, right? But is it 3 times earnings? And that multiple could be 2 times earnings based on the risks that are associated with the business. So, I think these business owners, a lot of business owners, get expectations in their head by the information that's readily available online. But it's not just about your financial performance. It's not just about how much profit you're generating. There's all these other risks associated with the business that play in the minds of a buyer. Are all your customers, are all your sales part of, a few customers? Do you have a customer concentration issue? Those are the things that we really need to think about before you take a business to the market.
Well, and I think about your background, you got the business side, then you got the real estate side, and a great number of the businesses aren't just a simple business only transaction. It's the business and the real estate. And so you guys bring that to the table as well.
We do, yeah. So depending on the state, for Colorado, absolutely. I'm the managing broker for our firm. We have our real estate license. I've got commercial real estate experience. Um, and so we'll do the commercial real estate transaction along with the business. Now I'll say that, but sometimes we get into a transaction where there's an overly complex real estate situation. And that's one thing that we're really good at. And I think any business broker should be acknowledged where their expertise is. Sometimes we'll bring in a pure commercial real estate advisor that can recommend and help us transact that real estate part of the deal, because we can't be everything to everyone. You've got to be really good at one thing. And for us, that's selling businesses. But if there's a simple real estate transaction involved, we'll handle that as well.
I think about that business owner that's, I'm really smart. Obviously, I've got a successful business, and, I've done a typical entrepreneurial persona, and go, well, I can do this by myself. When you see the business owner that decides to go down the path by himself, and there's a potential buyer that's having multiple requests, what do you typically see occur for both the business owner and their underlying business when they're entertaining buyers?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think that typically they'll leave money on the table. I also think that oftentimes in that situation, the business owner gets distracted and they focus more on the prize and less on the business. And so you start seeing detrimental impact to the business, sales going down, profit going down. And really what a buyer, and I've seen this strategy before, a buyer will make, oh yeah, we're interested in your business, and they just keep dragging it out and dragging it out. And there's no one there controlling the process, and there's no one there being that advocate. And so those transactions, typically are for less. Not that they can't get done. There are a lot of transactions that can get done, but they're typically for less. They typically take longer, and it's typically way more frustrating for the business owner because he's not in control. And I think that's one role that the business broker does play, is you've got to control the transaction, and it's better to have the control of the sell side than on the buy side.
Well, I've heard it a number of times from folks, and they'll say the business deal between here and there dies a number of times along the way.
That's true.
And I think about, for the business owner, highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows through the process. And you guys see hundreds of transactions go by, and the business owner may have seen theirs, one only.
Yeah. Lifetime event. Most time this is the first business that a lot of these business owners will sell, or the second or the third. But one or two transactions, you don't see the full gamut of what can happen. And I think that's a great point that you kind of bring up there, is that it's important for the business owner to consider the whole team, and we're just a part of that. It's not just about the broker. It's about having the right attorney. It's about having the right CPA. It's about having the right wealth advisor, financial advisor, post-close. What are you going to do with your money? Are you just going to put it in a bank account? There's these types of things that sometimes are overlooked. And one of our roles, and I think we do a really good job, is forming that right team and making sure that the right advisors telling the owner the right message are on the team.
I think about, and I'll talk to business owners frequently that have sold their company, and I'll say, so on the Monday following the close, what did you do? And former military guy like me, you'd see a general officer retire, and he went from step and fetch to carrying his own luggage. And you think about the business owner on Monday, goes, well, I've got nowhere to go. So I think you bring up a very valid point, is that post-sale planning side, I think, gets little attention from business owners without it being drawn to their attention.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that's one thing we're trying to do ahead of time, is make recommendations for these business owners. Like, what are you going to do with this money? What are your plans emotionally after sale? And we actually do an assessment prior to taking on a client. It's called a pre-score. It's done by a value builder, and it's an emotional assessment. Are you ready to sell your company? And are you mentally ready to take that next step? And that's a big part of it. We want to make sure that business owners are committed to the process and they do have good plans, post close.
It's funny, for me, I've gone through a designation for exit planning, and I was driven there by an event that happened to a friend of mine, and his business didn't transact, and it was a really unfortunate event. But in looking at the folks that are getting ready to sell their business, I think they think exit is a thing in and of itself. I think having a business to be ready for purchase at any time is frankly good business. You don't have customer concentration. You don't have owner dependency. You have policies and procedures. You have intellectual property protected. And, maybe that's something to comment on. When you look at the value of a company, intellectual property, the special sauce a company has, do the owners understand that they should protect that?
Um, Oftentimes, no. I don't think that they take the steps necessary to protect their IP. Um, so that's definitely an area that I think that business owners can improve. Um, it's a topic that's not discussed as much as financials
Hmm.
or the profit of the business, and it's one that I think as we get into a time of security breaches and the
Hmm.
internet, being more prevalent in a lot of these businesses, that it's something that is definitely going to need to be protected more.
Well, I think about a business where, let's say they have a very proprietary process that really is the mechanism or discipline that has propelled their company. And they go, what's to prohibit one of their key employees from walking off with all the secret sauce on how they do things and forming a competitor? And I don't think that's well covered or protected for many of the business owners.
No, I don't think so either. That's something that if you're entrenched in the business on the day to day and you're the guy out selling product or you're the guy out
Mhm.
there helping on the line or whatever facet of the business that you're entrenched in, you can't step back and work on the business and work from a strategic level and pay attention to the things like, is there risk for IP? Is there risk of someone spinning off of, the same product that we're working on? When you're in it and you're working in the business, you can't be working on the business.
I was talking earlier with another peer of yours that's in Raincatcher, and I always think about the customer as concentration risk, and he brought up, well, what about supplier risk?
Yeah,
And if you have a sole supplier and that's interrupted, what does that do to your business valuation?
yeah, absolutely. That is, it's detrimental. I
Mhm.
mean, if you're, the best time to sell a business is on the up. It says
Mhm.
it's growing. It says profits, revenue are increasing. You can always, I think the natural inclination is to always try and get to that next level, but you're always going to have something ahead of you. So there, if you can sell a company as it's growing and a buyer sees future growth and future potential, that's the best time to sell.
Mhm.
But if you have a supplier risk and you're on that trajectory and you lose your supplier and things start to decline, it's going to be really, really hard to sell your business on a negative trajectory.
Yeah, you can't run fast enough.
You cannot run fast enough. And we see this all the time. I mean, we see business owners that come to us, everything looks great. We're very excited about selling the business and we start the process and then something happens. They take their eye off the ball. Maybe they didn't identify this problem up front and there's a negative impact on the business. And it's amazing how quickly the buyers dry up when you start to have a negative path on a business, relative to revenue or profit.
We talk on many different parts of the business. For you guys, you'll see a business owner that's electively coming to the table to sell. What do you How frequently do you see the business owner that shows up that's had a health event that no longer has a choice and has to sell? What are your thoughts when you run across that client?
It's very challenging. We actually are working with a client recently that ran into an issue like that, and it it makes it very difficult. One, sell, back to the comment about a negative trajectory on income or revenue. But then you lose all leverage. I mean, if you have to sell, you're really going to lose the leverage in the transaction. And we really, our process is built around creating leverage in a transaction and creating buyer attention and multiple buyers at the table. And when we're desperate and we have to sell, or the seller has to sell, you really can't create that leverage. So you're stuck with probably an outcome that's not too desirable.
I think about the business owner that's listening, right? And, like I think I'm bulletproof, and I'm obviously not, but I think I am. And you kind of go, well, I've got time, and I'll put off doing the strategic look. I'll put off looking at all these issues that you talk about are value creators for a business. And if you're a business owner listening, we don't know what the future holds, but everybody's going to exit their business one way or another, either voluntarily or at death. And hopefully, this episode will be the spark that will cause you to step back from your business and look at those key drivers and start doing it now. And so if you have an unannounced buyer that shows up, you get a call and go, hey, somebody wants to buy your business. That would be a good thing. So I'm a business owner and I got a call unsolicited by a firm that wants to buy my business. What might you recommend?
Call me.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's, that happens all the time. There's firms out there that all they do is cold call and try and source deals. I mean, there are buyers, and we talk to them. They're calling us as well to help them source deals. But it's not rare at all for a business owner to get a call from someone that's looking to buy their business, whether it's a financial buyer or strategic buyer. I go back to your comment about everyone's going to exit a business one way or another, whether it's by choice or by death. I mean, and that's an unfortunate truth that, what happens if you can't sell your business? You continue to work and work and work, and ultimately, unfortunately, that does happen. And quality of life and a good balance is obviously important, and having someone find that exit is even more important. My recommendation to a business owner, if they do get a call out of the blue, is to make sure that they verify who they're speaking with, make sure that it is a legitimate group. Unfortunately, there are people out there that try and take advantage of the information that they get. Whether it's through a business broker or whether it's through an attorney, make sure that you're protected with the non-disclosure agreement before you actually have conversations with someone. And make sure that they are really sincere and are capitalized to be able to make a purchase before you start sharing information with them.
Well, I think about that comment, and so because that sounds like a really good offer. And my answer would be compared to what?
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
so
great point. We actually got a new client that we've been working with lately that they got a great offer. Someone called them up and they said, we love your business. We'll give you $8 million for your business. And they were like, well, this is everything we've ever wanted. And they started down the path, and they stopped and they started thinking about it. They're like, okay, well, what if we had someone on our team that was out there and we had multiple people looking at this business, and we went out to the market, could we get more? And we're going down the path with them. And yeah, I absolutely think we can get more. I think that it's a great business and we can probably get 50% more. And so they're going to net what they probably would sell, to this other group. So that's part.
I think about that, kind of going, well, it's the first time, and the buyer may have done this multiple times. You're doing it, as an owner, maybe one time. And I think it's one of those things, as if, for a business owner listening, I said, what's the harm in calling? There isn't a harm for them to call and say, I have an unsolicited offer for my business. But I think that also plays into the part, if you've got all the levers in place and you're doing all the things correctly and, you've de-risked your business, and then you kind of go, you have some general notion of where you stand in the market if you've done all that properly.
Yeah, you do. But I think it's important for the business owners to surround themselves with the right advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And just because, they may have an attorney or they may have a CPA, those may not be the best advisors because there are industry specialists. There are people that focus on transactions that know the levers to pull and know the value of certain things that maybe a generalist does not. And that's an important part for a business owner to kind of take into consideration.
I think about the analogy. We all see it in the healthcare field, right? And you're going to your family practitioner and says, you need a valve replaced in your heart. And you go, well, do you do that on Saturdays? And you go, well, no. Well, did you send him to the cardiovascular surgeon? Yeah, that's my first time. No, that's not the guy you want.
Yeah.
It's not the lady that you want. You want somebody that's what they do. And I think folks stumble over what they perceive as the cost, where I really think down the road, if they step back and look post sale, it's really an expense that it costs them at the end.
Absolutely. And that applies to a broker, that applies to an attorney.
It's across the board.
Across the board. I say this to a lot of our clients, and when we get kickback on our costs and our fees, and I think they're in par with the industry, but we look at what we do as a revenue generator.
Mm-hmm.
We're driving more value than we are an expense. So if someone can go out with a broker or do it on their own and they can sell it for $1, we're going to be able to go out and leverage our process and our buyer pool and sell it for $1.25. And so we're going to get 25% more and pay for ourselves. And
I think about the auction bid, or the auction process. I've got 3 buyers that want to buy your company.
Yep.
And the other buyers know it.
Yep.
Are they going to bring their sharp pencil or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely leverage the multiple people looking at a business at one time. I mean, that is how and it's not just price. And the thing we haven't talked about, and I think that a lot of business owners don't realize, is that most buyers are not going to come to the table and write you a check for 100% of the purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't happen, and it's getting less and less common. So, okay, what does that mean? What are the contingencies of the rest of your money? And so, not only you may have 3 buyers at the table, and they may be all offering the same price, but the deal terms are going to be better, maybe one or the other. And so you can really leverage that when you have multiple people at the table.
I think about one of the things that I understand about Raincatcher is you guys are storytellers too. Because, for the business owner, you can have the numbers.
Did I caught or,
What you mean, that fish? That one? Clearly you come from a long line of storytellers in the fishing world, but I think about when you guys put the offering memorandum and stuff together,
mm-hmm.
and that you guys tell the story of the business, and I think you do that, from what I understand, really well.
We do. Our roots as a company, we really were founded as a digital marketing company that does business brokerage. Now we've evolved into a very refined business brokerage company, but our foundation is the way that we market. And I mean that the way that we go out and tell the story, tell our brand, tell our message, I think is one part of it. The other part is telling the story about the business and the reasons why this is a wonderful business and the reasons why you should be buying it. So yeah, when we work with a client, we put together a very comprehensive confidential information memorandum. It's kind of hard to say, but we put that together, and it's robust. I mean, it tells the story about the history of the business, about the buying motives. We don't shy away from the risk. So we talk about the risk of buying the business. I think that's something that's very real, and that buyers, are going to do the research on their own. And so we put that into our packages, talk about industry and financials, and we have interviews with the owner, and sometimes we do videos that we attach. And those are all the way that you present the business, and you only get one opportunity at this. The way that your first impressions are so important. And so we never rush a business to the market. We try and move, quickly, but we do a lot of prep work and we do a lot of research so that we know when we go to the market, we have that one shot to make a good first impression, and it's the best one.
I've been wearing you out for quite some time, and I'm a fan of business owners. I love talking to them, and I'm always amazed. You go, you did what? And it made a living doing what? So I'm always fascinated by the business owner. And of course, the podcast is all about business owners and the folks that serve that marketplace. For you, and and looking over the time that you've been working in this industry, what are the tricks or techniques that you use that help get businesses sold?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think it's important to, and we talked about this a little bit, create leverage in the process. It's important to control the process, and it's not, you don't want to just throw a business out on the market and wait and see what happens. So the trick to getting the deal done is having a very refined process to where you're casting a very wide net. You're getting very good exposure, and that can be a multiple prong attack from, your own database to different listing platforms to, co-oping with other brokers and investment partners, but driving that process to a certain point, a decision point for buyers that you attract. And I think a mistake that's often made is that people just let's see what happens. Let's throw it out the market and see what happens. And we don't work that way.
That's the spaghetti approach.
Yeah, it is. So, so for all the deals that we work on, we have a very specific deadline for all offers. So we'll put it out on the market in our different marketing channels, and we'll tell all the buyers that here's the deadline. If you want to be involved in the process to buy this business, here's the deadline that you have to submit an offer to us. And here's the expectation of what that offer looks like. We tell them what we want. And if you don't make an offer under these terms, you're not conforming to our process, and that'll be looked upon negatively.
Mm-hmm.
And it works. It definitely works to help control the process, set very specific deadlines so we can, move the process along. And that's one of the things that I think really helps. And you don't see it a lot in this size range, the types of businesses that we're working with.
For the business owner that's out there and goes, I'm in a particular industry, I don't know if Raincatcher works in my industry. Is there specific industries you guys concentrate on?
We're fairly agnostic on specific industries that we work with. We know what we don't like. We know what we do like. We have some good experience in property management, vacation rental businesses, construction niche type businesses, manufacturing, B2B services. But for me, when I really look at small business sales, it's not specific to the industry. It's specific to the process. It's how do you take that process? How do you take that business and move it from A to Z and control it all the way through, and all the techniques that you use to get that deal closed? And if you don't have a process, and if I recommend this to a business owner, if you're talking to a broker, ask them, what is your process? How do you handle diligence? How do you handle, the information, the data that we give you? How do you handle closing? And if someone can't clearly articulate exactly what their process is, they probably don't have one,
mm-hmm.
and they're winging it. And that's something that we do. We have a process for everything, and we really know how to move a business through that cycle. So it transcends industry, in my opinion, because we do enough research up front to really understand that industry and know how to get the deal to the closing line.
And you guys have, as I understand it, some rather unique tools on your website that's available to the business owner that's considering selling.
Correct. Yeah, we talked a little bit about the value builder score,
mm-hmm.
the pre-assessment, the pre-score, which is kind of the emotional score. Those are complementary. We work with business owners really to earn their trust in their business.
mm-hmm.
So we do free valuations. They can take the assessment, get a 27-page report from Value Builder. They can take the pre-score and get that report as well. And those are, just intro tools that we use just
mm-hmm.
to, kind of set the basis for conversation. Again, we're not, if you're wanting to sell tomorrow, we're not the brokerage firm for you. We're not going to throw a deal on the market. We really try and understand that if this is the right time, the right fit, and the right opportunity for both sides.
For the business owner says, geez, I need to reach out to Jason. How do they find you on social media?
On social media, you can go to LinkedIn. Is probably a great way to find me. Jason Thomas Denver, and also through our website. There's a way. It's raincatcher.com. It's a great way just to go to our About Us team page, and you can see my smiling face, and you reach out to me directly from there.
Are there any pictures of any fish on that?
You can go to my Facebook page. It's loaded of it's either my children or pictures of fish or elk on my Facebook.
Well, with all this being said, we'll close with perhaps either the best advice that you ever received or advice you might offer to the business owner that's thinking about selling.
Yeah, my father-in-law is a contractor, and he's ingrained this in my brain. It's, measure twice, cut once. And I think that applies to a lot of different things. It's not just carpentry, it's not just cutting wood. You really need to think about what you're doing before you act. You really need to take the time to, talk to the right people, formulate the right plan before you jump into selling your business. So think about, measure it twice, talk to multiple brokers, talk to multiple attorneys, think about the different levers that are in your business that can drive value or detract value before you move forward with selling your company. And that's probably the biggest advice. Look, we are in the business of selling businesses, but we don't want business owners to fail in that process. And so there's a lot of work that can be done up front. And, give us a call and we can talk about it. There's a lot of options out there.
Well, Jason, I suppose we could talk about fishing for some time now, but I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience and knowledge and your philosophy about helping the business owner. And but sincerely appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's been a great time. I really appreciate it.